The tests what we carried out were of two, we can put them into two categories. One is psychophysical test and other is speech perception test. In psychophysical test, we did gap detection in noise, measurement of modulation detection thresholds in sinusoidally amplitude modulated noise, and the duration pattern test. And in the speech perception test, we did speech recognition of sentences in multi-talker babble at -5 dB signal to noise ratio, and in speech recognition of spectrally reduced, that is vocoded sentences. We also carried out audiometric measurements to find out the hearing thresholds of each of the people in both the groups. Coming on to the stimulus and procedures, all stimuli for psychoacoustic tests were generated using MATLAB software. A 16-bit digital to analog converter was used with a 44,100 Hz sampling rate. A two-interval force choice method, that's maximum likelihood procedure, was employed to track 60% correct response criterion. This was given by Green in 1993 and 1990. This procedure was used in gap detection in noise, measurement of modulation detection thresholds, also known as temporal modulation transfer function, at 4 different frequencies, that is at 8 Hz, 20 Hz, 60 Hz, and 200 Hz. Then, in gap detection in noise, the subject's ability to detect a temporal gap in the center of 750 milliseconds white noise was measured. And in temporal modulation transfer function, a 500 millisecond Gaussian noise was sinusoidally amplitude modulated at 8 Hz, 20 Hz, 60 Hz, and 2000 Hz. And the thresholds of modulation detection was detected. And speech perception in noise was tested by measuring speech identification scores for custom-made sentence material containing 10 sentences with 4 to 5 keywords each in each sentence. And 4-talker babble, that is 4-talker, the multi-talker babble was added to the sentences at -5 dB SNR using MATLAB software. The apparatus that was used was as follows. Pure tone audiometry was done with a commercially available calibrated audiometer, that is Alcon 3 and 3, and stimuli for all the tests were presented through calibrated high fidelity headphones using personal computer. And the noise levels in the train driver's cabin were measured using the sound level meter TES 13508 using A-rating network. Coming on to the results, let's start first with the psychophysical tests. That is, first we have here gap detection in noise. An independent sample speed test was done to find significance of difference between the means of the groups, means of the gap detection thresholds. The results showed that the any group, that is the control group, had significantly better gap detection thresholds compared to the train driver's group. As you can see in the picture, left hand side, you can see the gap detection thresholds of the train drivers, which are obviously very higher compared to the control group on the right side. So this shows increased gap detection, that means increased gap detection thresholds with poor temporal processing skills. Now, coming on to the modulation detection thresholds in sinusoidally amplitude modulated noise, you can see that a MANOVA was done to find the significance of difference between means of modulation detection thresholds of two groups at 8 Hz, 20 Hz, 60 Hz, and 200 Hz of modulation frequency. And the results revealed that there was no significant difference between the two. As you can see in the picture, the one in red is the control group and in blue is train driver group. In 8 Hz, 20 Hz, and 200 Hz of modulation frequency, you can see that both the groups have scored equally, whereas in the 60 Hz of modulation frequency, you can see the train drivers surprisingly have scored better, which should be saying that they have performed better in this temporal processing test. But if you can see the error bar, it shows a lot of standard deviation, which cannot add to the significance of that result. So overall, in this test, you can see that the result is not very significant. There is no much difference. And in the third of the temporal processing test, that is duration pattern test, you can see that an independent sample speed test revealed that the trained drivers group had duration pattern scores significantly poorer than the age-matched normal adults. The comparison between both the groups suggests that the temporal processing declines with noise exposure. Similar results have been found by other investigators too in temporal sequencing tasks. If you can see in the diagram, you can see that temporal and the trained drivers have scored lesser than the control group, which clearly shows poorer duration pattern performance. And in the third test, you see that in the speech perception in multi-talker babble, we see that the speech recognition scores were converted into the rationalized R-sign transfer scores, and all the statistical analysis was done on these scores. The independent sample sleep test showed that the individual's ability to recognize speech in adverse listening conditions was poor in trained drivers group compared to the control group. As it's very clear in this picture here on the left-hand side, you can see the trained drivers scores are poorer in this particular test compared to the right-hand side control group. And in the last of the test protocol, there is a speech perception in vocoded stimuli. You can see that the individual's ability to identify vocoded speech declines due to noise exposure. And it's very clear in this picture. Again, on the left-hand side, we find poorer speech perception scores, that's of the trained drivers compared to the control group on the right-hand side. Coming on to the discussion, the temporal processing abilities, especially the gap detection in noise and the division pattern scores, were reduced in trained drivers group compared to the control group. It should be noted that all subjects in the trained drivers group had clinically normal hearing sensitivity and audiometric frequency range. But even though you can see that they had poorer temporal processing skills, this shows that noise-related physiological changes in the auditory system begin even before the elevation of the pure tone thresholds. Furthermore, the trained drivers group had significantly poorer speech perception abilities compared to the control group in adverse listening conditions. Most noticeable was reduced speech identification scores when the stimuli was presented with only temporal envelope, that is using vocoded stimuli. And the control group, that is the NA group here, had almost perfect scores with this stimuli, but the trained drivers had significantly poorer scores.